Most people think AI competition is a Silicon Valley issue. It's not. It's an everything problem and an everyone issue. And a breaking report from Anthropic might be the biggest wake up call we've gotten so far on how AI competition actually impacts us all and not just those living in Silicon Valley. That's because Anthropic just publicly accused three Chinese AI labs of extracting Claude's most advanced capabilities through 16 million prompts in more than 24,000 fake accounts. Anthropic's not alone, and the reports are escalating. I mean, OpenAI just sent a memo to Congress earlier this month telling a similar story. Google reportedly identified over 100,000 distillation prompts targeting their Gemini. And all of this has been in like a 2-ish week span. And probably not coincidentally, Chinese AI models have legit taken off this year, both in terms of capabilities and in usage. So, why does it matter? Maybe you don't work at an AI company. Well, here's why you should care, even if you've even never touched an AI tool, because it's about more than OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. It's also about Microsoft and Meta and Amazon and a lot of the other big tech companies that maybe just hold a big position in your retirement portfolio. These are the models behind the software your company uses, the platforms your retirement fund is invested in, and the systems that are literally reshaping the American job market right now. So, if a foreign competitor can reportedly copy and paste all of that US innovation overnight for pennies on the dollar, the ripple effect hits everyone, not just big tech. So, we're going to tackle that bombshell report and a lot more on today's Everyday AI. What's going on, y'all? Welcome. My name is Jordan Wilson, and I'm the host of this thing, and it's for you. It's an unedited, unscripted, daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping everyday business leaders like you and me keep up with these nonstop AI developments because it's quite literally nonstop. And I tell you what to focus on to grow your company and your career. So if that's what you're trying to do, if you're like, hey, I don't have 10 hours a day to take care of this, do it for me, Jordan. I got you. Go to our website, youreverydayai.com. There, you can go sign up for our free daily newsletter. Each day, we recap the highlights from that day's podcast, as well as keeping you up to date with all the other AI news that you need to know. Speaking of things you need to know, yeah, dropping it again, 7/12, 7/13. Go listen if you haven't already. That's our 2026 AI prediction and roadmap series. So, is China really stealing AI from the US? Anthropic says so, and they've joined OpenAI as the latest to accuse China of distillation. And this is a pretty shocking report because we've heard this before. We've heard it from OpenAI, we've heard it from Google, and we've heard other big tech companies kind of mumble about it, right? But no one's directly coming with like receipts and straight up pointing fingers. I think OpenAI has probably been the closest. They even went to Congress about that, but we're going to unwrap that here in a bit. But this is a pretty big story. So on today's show, we're going to unpack Anthropic's bombshell accusations against these three Chinese AI labs. We're going to explain what the heck distillation even is. If you're a non-technical person, I'm going to tell you, well, why every major US lab is sounding the alarm right now and expose the elephant in the room that makes this story far more complicated and also interesting. All right. So here's what it started with. Yesterday, Anthropic put out essentially a blog post, and obviously it's going to make its round in the media today and probably throughout the rest of the week. But here's what they said. I'm just going to read a little snippet or the beginning of their post and their announcement so you don't have to. So they said, we have identified industrial scale campaigns by three AI laboratories, DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax, to illicitly extract Claude's capabilities to improve their own models. These labs generated over 16 million exchanges with Claude through approximately 24,000 fraudulent accounts in violation of our terms of service and regional access restrictions. These labs use a technique called distillation, which involves training a less capable model on the outputs of a stronger one. Distillation is widely used in a legitimate training method. For example, Frontier AI Labs routinely distilled their own models to create smaller, cheaper versions for their customers. But Distillation can also be used for illicit purposes. Competitors can use it to acquire powerful capabilities from other labs in a fraction of the time and at a fraction of the cost that it would take to develop them independently. These campaigns are growing in intensity and sophistication. The window to act is narrow and the threat extends beyond any single company or region. Addressing it will require rapid, coordinated action among industry players, policymakers, and the global AI community. All right. So before I go any further, I'm going to state the obvious here, right? I'm from Chicago. I live in the United States. Yes, we have a global audience on the podcast, and I'm sure, I'm going to get plenty of, emails or messages about how I'm being overly American or something like this, right? I'm speaking for our main audience, right? Our biggest audience is in the US. So I am taking this through the US's perspective. So if you don't necessarily care, feel free to hit skip on this one. But I do think it's important because I actually think that this story right here, as it unravels a little bit more, as we start to peel layers off the onion, we are going to see it is far more consequential than just Chinese AI labs reportedly ripping off US labs. It's much bigger than that. So anyways, let's get a little bit more into the details of Anthropic's report. So they did accuse DeepSeek, Moonshot AI, and Minimax in coordinated extraction campaigns, distilling their models, and they traced the activity to those specific lab researchers using IP and metadata. So here's why this matters, and this is according to Anthropic. So they detected Minimax before they released the model being trained. All right, so essentially, if you haven't heard Minimax, they've legit blown up. And I'm going to bring some of my own receipts here in a little bit, why I think that they not singled out Minimax necessarily, but why I think Minimax is especially important in the broader scope of this story. So Anthropic said that Minimax redirected nearly half of its traffic to capture the newest system's capability. And one proxy network managed over 20,000 fake accounts simultaneously to avoid detection. So this isn't, again, reportedly, right? This isn't just a couple rogue researchers at a lab, right? This is a concentrated effort nationally in China for their biggest labs to, according to the labs themselves, steal their data, right? And train their models on their respective work. So now let's get into a little bit of the receipt. So I have mentioned this once or twice over the past 3 weeks, and talking a little bit more about the Anthropic and OpenAI and Google kind of competition here domestically. But you have to rewind a little bit to really understand. So without getting into too much detail, Anthropic's bread and butter is developers. It's the API, right? Anthropic doesn't have, 900 million weekly active users like OpenAI. They don't have, hundreds of millions, of users like Google. Their bread and butter, and according to reports, the overwhelming majority of their revenue comes from the API. So that's when developers, builders, software engineers are using a certain API to accomplish a task. A lot of times, it's maybe writing software, building apps, running, financial transactions, right? Everything can be done through code. People think it's just software engineering. No, it's not. Computer use, agents, running complex, data queries in certain, financial modeling programs, etc. Right? So Anthropic's bread and butter is on the API. So there's pros and cons to that, right? The pro is, the price is not capped. So whether you're paying $20 or $200 a month for ChatGPT or Gemini, or if you're on an enterprise plan, right, the spend or your cost as a company is capped. On the API side, it's not, right? So, maybe let's just say one company might spend, $1 million with OpenAI for a certain number of enterprise licenses. They might spend $5 or $10 million on the API side with Anthropic, because if they find Anthropic's models are good enough to account for that cost, they'll do it, right? So there's no cap to that. So if you go back a year ago, and this is March 2025, if you're looking at Open Router, so Open Router is essentially the most popular third-party API tool. So you sign up for an Open Router key, and then it makes it very easy. Actually, if you ever want to switch providers, you can do it without much friction, right? So it's essentially, think of it as a model agnostic marketplace. You sign up for it, and at any time you can switch things out. It doesn't mean you shouldn't re-engineer things when you switch things out with a couple of clicks of the button, but it makes it very easy for companies to experiment with different models, but they are the biggest when it comes to running inference, right? So they have the most data in terms of who's using tokens globally. And a year ago, it was Anthropic. Anthropic was in a commanding lead. Again, this ties to Anthropic's revenue. Anthropic is reportedly trying to go public any quarter now, right? We've heard by the end of 2026. And their month-over-month revenue is reportedly stalling. Still growing at a crazy rate, just not growing at the same rate it was. So technically stalling is just less of a hockey stick and more of just a nice uphill climb. But this has to be a concern because last year, 40% market share on Open Router, tracking total token share by model author. All right. Last week, the last full week of February that Open Router tracked, 12%. All right. And they are in third place. And guess who is in first place now? Minimax, out of nowhere. Right. So you actually have in the top 7 spots. All right. I'll just read them. Number 1, Minimax, now at 20%. Number 2, Google. Number 3, Anthropic. Number 4, OpenAI. Number 5, ZAI. Number 6, Moonshot. Number 7, DeepSeek. So the 3 companies essentially that Anthropic accused of distilling their models are now leading the token share, right? So people might be saying, oh, but Jordan, they're open source. Why does it matter? Don't companies just download these models and run them locally? Sure, they do, right? But obviously, a lot of companies still, need this speed and the capabilities of using these models in the cloud, and they're obviously right using them in the cloud because right now, if we look at Minimax has almost 3 trillion tokens that they used last week via Open Router. This is just via Open Router, right? So the actual number is a lot more. So I want you to keep that in mind. Let's do a little math here, if you may, or if we may, right? I'm not going to make you do the math. We can try to do it together. So Anthropic went from a year ago, a 40% share down to a 12% share now in terms of total tokens used in Open Router. All right. So let's just use that 3 trillion versus where Anthropic's at right now, which was about 600 billion. So much less. So if we use a 3-to-1 mixed ratio, all right, of token usage, because we don't know, caching, input, output, we don't. Let's just ballpark some numbers here, right? So let's say 75% input, 25% output, which is pretty standard. If Anthropic was still in the top spot where Minimax is now, not even saying if they had the same commanding lead they did a year ago, right? Even if their lead shrunk and if they were just in Minimax's spot, right? That's about roughly $13 to $22 million a week of lost revenue. All right. It's not a ton, but on the high side, that's $1 billion. Right. And that's just one. This is just through Open Router. So I'm sure that there's plenty of losses, right? People directly working, obviously, in the Claude Council who are no longer or maybe reducing their spend there. So my hunch is Anthropic's size of the token pie. Even though the pie is growing, their slice is so much smaller. And my guess is the fact that Anthropic came out guns blazing, because no one's done this, right? OpenAI surprisingly did it very suit and tie, right? They didn't come out with these kind of receipts, against the companies. Maybe they didn't have them. Maybe they were saving them, in case they needed to do this in some, litigation type setting. Although we don't know if that will be possible because it's China. But still, you're looking at probably even just in Open Router, right? For what we can track, probably 750 million to $1 billion a year. And it's probably, like I said, multiple billions a year, as other developers are now saying, wait, if I can get Minimax, right? So here on my screen for our live stream audience, I'm showing the artificial analysis, kind of the cost to run intelligence index, right? So this is, on the different axes you have, or axes, right? I learned this 20 years ago, right? I can speak. But you have your intelligence index. So smarter models, right, are measured vertically, right? So you want to be on the top, and then the models that cost less to run are on the left. So the ideal quadrant is the super smart models that are somehow super cheap to run, right? Which is very, very rare. And you'll see of the models in that quadrant, it's basically all China and Gemini 3 Flash, right? So you have Minimax, DeepSeek, Mimo, Kimi, and then Google Gemini 3 Flash. So what does this mean? And I've been saying this, right? So ever since the 2025 DeepSeek debacle, and I told you guys, don't fall for it. I literally said, this is not real. Don't fall for it. And I said, more stuff's going to come out, but DeepSeek is clearly, not doing this all themselves. I'll just say that because I don't want to write any checks I can't cash with my mouth, right? But OpenAI has essentially said that, yeah, DeepSeek's doing this, and now Anthropic said it as well. So I think it's safe enough to say, right? The consensus is, well, Chinese companies are distilling their models. The models are getting better and they're getting cheaper because presumably the Chinese companies don't have to pay as much. They're paying pennies on the dollar. So let's understand the basics of model distillation, right? So for our non-technical audience. So think of it as student teacher. So there's a student model that learns by studying a teacher's responses, right? So essentially the teacher's like, yo, here's the test, here's the answers, and here's my reasoning and rationale behind this, right? So Frontier Labs use this to legitimately in-house create cheaper versions of their own model. Right. And we've even seen and heard that companies are even using their own models to, create versions of themselves, self-replicating, right? All that crazy stuff. That's not what we're talking about here. So think, in most of the big frontier labs have talked about distilling smaller versions of their model based on the big, powerful model, right? But the controversy starts when competitors do it. So distillation in and of itself is a very normal thing to do within company A, right? Company A distilling their own model to create model AB, normal. Company C distilling from company A, not normal. That's authorization at a massive scale, right? I was thinking of a good example, right? This would kind of be like if there was a new video streaming service startup that just decided to record every single Netflix original. And then they went in there and they just kind of used some CGI to change a few scenes, change the faces on there. And then they just repackaged the content under their own brand. And then they launched a competing platform overnight, right? Probably doing it at 1% of the cost in 1% of the time. That's what model distillation is. And right now, well, there's no international, obviously, law against this. And there's no domestic law against this, number two. And number three, even if there were, there's really no way necessarily for US companies to hold Chinese companies accountable. And I think, without saying too much, I think we can all understand how, China's reputation in this realm kind of might and probably will and reportedly has bled over into the AI space. And that's not just me mumbling some random facts, right? So when it comes to IP theft, right, which is a different but kind of related issue, right? The FBI and the US Trade Representative estimate the cost of IP theft from China is between $225 billion to $600 billion each year. And some experts estimate right now that over the last 2 decades, that cumulative impact has resulted in a wealth transfer of $4 to $12 trillion away from the US economy. All right. So if AI is the new oil, If AI is the new military superpower, power, if AI is the new currency, then you can probably understand how China's repeated IP theft, again, according to the FBI and the US Trade Representative, between $225 billion to $600 billion per year, you can probably understand this whole AI race. It's happening for a reason. It's not just to say, oh, we have some cool new things that we can do at our company that we didn't do before. No, I've said before, AI is more important. Excuse me there, I had a cough. I do think AI is more important than oil. It's more important than gold. It's more important than natural resources. It's more important than I hate saying this. It's more important than probably anything right now, at least for the future. Maybe not today, but for the future. That's why you have every single company around the world putting every dollar they can, right? I think a story in our newsletter today, it was more than $600 billion. US big tech companies are investing into AI infrastructure this year, right? Every single company around the world wants to have the best models. In China, reportedly, they're fine with just kind of taking the work from others and repackaging it as their own. So this is how distillation becomes a weapon. So labs are using kind of these proxy services and thousands of fake accounts to access frontier models, mainly from the US. And it is targeted prompts that extract these high value capabilities like the reasoning. So it's not just the output, it's also the reasoning and how a model got to it. Because yeah, you can show, if you look at the teacher student model there, the teacher can give you the answers, but if they don't show their work, maybe the student can't learn as quickly, right? So that's why I think that this has gone even faster and further as reasoning models have been out for a little bit longer. And some attacks actually force models to reveal step-by-step reasoning for richer training data. And I get what you're probably thinking, right? Maybe I should have started with this or mentioned it earlier in the show. You're probably thinking, oh, that's rich, right? Stealing data. We can't feel bad for big tech stealing data, right? That's maybe how they got here, right? You can look at any of the big AI labs and you could probably make a legitimate case that at some point they maybe used some data that wasn't theirs, right? So Anthropic, I think they're one of the few so far that has actually paid a hefty and noteworthy fine for this. So in September of last year, Anthropic settled a $1.5 billion kind of judgment there in the Bartz versus Anthropic class action lawsuit. And the lawsuit alleged that Anthropic used about 500,000 pirated books from shadow libraries like LibGen to train its Claude model. So, and obviously, you can probably make the argument that other AI labs are facing similar lawsuits like this every single month of varying degrees, right? There's obviously the big one, OpenAI versus New York Times that's been going on for a couple of years. So I'll address the elephant in the room, right? You can say, oh, it's very rich that these AI labs are, accusing someone else of unauthorized data use when maybe that's how they got to the point where they're at today. I get that, but I think that we can talk about A without it being, turning into a B conversation, right? We don't have to have whataboutism, happening in our AI discussions, right? This can be a huge problem. And also unauthorized data training by the AI labs can also be a huge problem. And I think that we have to be able to separate it because the impacts are so much more than just the AI. And here's why. Actually, no, first, a little bit more. Because right now, Anthropic is arguing that these Chinese gains are wrongful and seen as proof that export controls have failed, right? So it's not like US labs have found themselves in this position for a lack of trying, right? It's hard to serve global audiences and, millions or hundreds of millions of people without sophisticated distillation attacks slipping through the cracks. And distill models are can be dangerous because they likely lack safety guardrails, right? That could enable military and surveillance use, right? That's one of the arguments a lot of the AI labs are making, as they start, talking to global leaders, both global AI leaders and just political leaders as well, saying, "Hey, we have to be able to put clamps on this, right? We have to be able to, almost protect this as American trade secrets, as American IP, because if it gets into the wrong hands, it could, in theory, be used against the US. I do think that's obviously a very popular and prevailing argument about, at least when you start to look at the geopolitical aspects of AI and why AI companies here in the US want to be able to keep a little bit of a lid, right? Obviously on their IP. And there's actually right now 4 congressional bills that are targeting chip exports, right? So that's another reason why we've seen a lot of these chip exports, on NVIDIA and others, although they've gone back and forth and there's exceptions and loopholes and they're changing every week, right? But that's one of the reasons, because US lawmakers are like, we don't want to give, the best technology to China or to certain other countries. But what we've seen here is they're finding a shortcut. They're finding a way around, which is actually probably faster. So yeah, maybe someone is sitting there is like, all right, well, you're going to prohibit the chips that we can buy. All right, well, we'll just distill the models. Much easier, much faster, much cheaper, right? Than having to buy, billions of dollars of GPUs and take the time to do it yourself. And it's not just Anthropic, right? And the frequency here is ramping up. So just in the last 2.5 weeks, so obviously Anthropic just published their findings yesterday. Yeah, that was the 23rd. I'm wrong on my little date here on my slide. So on Monday, OpenAI sent a memo to Congress naming DeepSeek on February 12th. So that was just under 2 weeks ago. And then similarly, in February, Google identified over 100,000 distillation prompts targeting Gemini that same week. So just in the last 2.5 weeks, the 3 big model makers have essentially gone public, right? But none as much as Anthropic. Yes, OpenAI did technically, take their issues straight to Congress, but they didn't in the same way as Anthropic name names, right? They didn't come with the receipts, right? And like I said, maybe they have more than they unveiled, but Anthropic really just kind of put it all out there on the table. Essentially, OpenAI just alleged DeepSeek used its models, outputs to train their rival R1 chatbot, right? And OpenAI just kind of said that they were free riding on American R&D. So I'm guessing that OpenAI may have more specifics, and there might be a reason that they didn't, unveil all those. But Anthropic really came out with the receipts here. But it's happening to all of the big labs. So like I said, OpenAI said that several major Chinese LLM providers show distillation consistent patterns, but they only named DeepSeek by name. And they did describe networks of unauthorized resellers that are helping Chinese labs evade access controls. So like I said, this is it's about much more than AI, right? This is about, the governments between the two nations, other parties getting involved, in helping, allegedly helping Chinese labs skirt some of these restrictions. We've seen the same things with GPU chips as well. And so far, no response from the Chinese AI labs. DeepSeek, according to reports, has not responded to a single media request across 14 months of allegations. Moonshot AI and Minimax declined every comment request. And then also the Chinese government and state media have offered no official response on the distillation claims when confronted by U.S. agencies. So what can be done, right? Because right now, watermarking, not really going to work. Rate limiting, not really going to work. It's too easy to overcome those things at scale, right? And a model's usefulness and its security just exists in a direct and unavoidable trade-off, right? Because you can access so much information, right, via these APIs. Heck, even just using something on the front end, right, with these higher paid plans, you can get a group of researchers together, lock them in there, or use an AI that does that. So it's not even like you need super sophisticated, systems to do this. You just need a little bit of money, some accounts. If you're doing it on the API side, it's much easier, but this is not necessarily something that requires a high level of sophistication, because literally it is the outputs and the thinking that you need to train new models inputs. So here's why we need to pay attention. Do you remember back to January 2025? Do you remember what happened? Right? DeepSeek model came out, just did really well in the benchmarks. It sent economic shock through the markets, quite literally. NVIDIA alone lost more than $600 billion in a single day. Other tech stocks, I believe there was a total temporary loss of more than $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Because of something that ultimately was not true, right? Because all of a sudden there was this panic, right? And I've been talking about this quite literally. Man, the only good thing about having a daily podcast, because it's kind of cringe when someone asks and I'm like, oh, I have a podcast, that's my job, is I have so many receipts. You can go see. I've been talking about this since late 2023 and early 2024 about how essentially AI companies are driving not just the US economy, but the world economy, right? For decades. You've never had such a concentrated mix of the top companies by market cap in the US being all in the same industry or sector. It's actually quite literally never happened, right? But now you have the 5 biggest companies when it comes to market cap in the US, all essentially they're AI companies or companies that have become AI companies, right? You can make the claim like Microsoft, Tesla, et cetera, Amazon, right? Google. But this hasn't happened before. So when you get a story like the DeepSeek, right, and they say, oh, yeah, we trained this for, pennies, according to everyone else, you can see how that's going to send legit panic through everyone, right? If you're looking at your retirement and you're like, wow, 30% of my retirement is in these 7 companies, right? This isn't good. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? Right. So cheap open Chinese models may seem like a win, but like, what's the cost? Because distillation technically, I think, threatens the very business model of every US company, because these models powering American businesses. That's the other thing that we aren't really recognizing. Yes, some American businesses are opting to use Chinese models, whether they're doing so locally or doing so on the API side, which I personally would not recommend. However, most enterprise companies in the US have started to completely reshape how they run. And in the same way, the auto industry runs on fuel, runs on oil, right? The American enterprise runs on AI. I don't care what you say. Look at every single company that has continued to grow and that is pushing the US economy forward. They are running on AI. They are implementing AI top to bottom. So this is so much more than just, a Silicon Valley issue. Because even the models right now that are powering these American businesses, well, they also may just be training their foreign competitors right now and simultaneously, yet slowly, eating away at public company gains. So what's the takeaway here? Well, the takeaway is, even though this might just seem like some dorky AI drama, it's much more. This is about the future of who is the global superpower, right? This is about, right, who achieves artificial general intelligence first, right? Who is going to start blazing the path toward artificial super intelligence, which I don't even want to get into today. This is about more than copying the smart kids paper in front of you. This impacts every major US business. This probably impacts your portfolio. This is something that deserves our attention. Do we know the answer? No. Is there a way that this could be solved? I'm actually not sure, but we're obviously going to be continuing to talk to smart people here on this show. We're going to continue to bring you the information, and hopefully, as answers become available on what's next in this saga, right? What's next in the US proprietary models versus the Chinese open source models? We're not sure what's going to happen next, but we're going to be here every day trying to help provide you the answers and clarity on what to do next. All right. I hope this one was helpful. If it was, make sure you also go out and check out that episode 712, 713, our 2026 AI prediction and roadmap series. And if this was helpful, tell someone about it. Please take 30 seconds, subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, please take a couple of seconds to subscribe. That really means a lot to us, and it helps us reach other people who are so confused about what the heck is going on in AI. All right. I'm going to try to help and give you the straight facts on that. So thank you for tuning in. Please go to youreverydayai.com, sign up for the free daily newsletter. Thanks for listening today. We hope to hear you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI.